Wow, it has been a long time since I've done this. Death Battle has finally released Mahito versus Shigaraki, and actually a day earlier than I thought. Yeah, I don't know why this was released on a Saturday, but hey, I ain't complaining. This episode I have been waiting for a while. This was actually one of my favorite Kickstarter matchups on the list. And if you want to understand a little bit of my opinion on this matchup, I did make a video on it. But yeah, this episode is finally out, and I'm going to review it. Now, you might be wondering, if you pay attention to my channel at all, why am I doing a review on this episode? My last review was Bowser versus Eggman, and honestly, yeah, I made that video when Bowser versus Eggman came out. So why am I doing it for this matchup, out of all things? It's not exactly the biggest matchup that has even come out of this year so far. So why this one? And not literally one of my most wanted episodes, Ghost Rider versus Spawn, or any of the other ones. Now, let me say this. Mahito versus Shigaraki is not one of my favorite matchups in Death Battle history. Or actually, it kind of is, but I wouldn't even place this matchup in my top 15. Compared to Spawn vs. Ghost Rider, which at the time of its release was my second to third most wanted episode in Death Battle. See my top 10 most wanted episodes if you want to know more about that. But this episode in particular means a lot to me. For one, this episode came out at a pretty good time, when I had just finished My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen when the episode was announced, so I was already pretty hyped for it from that moment. Two, this matchup actually got me interested in watching My Hero Academia and got me really interested in Shigaraki as a character. Also, this is one of those matchups where I've actually gone back and forth on who I thought would win, even though it did not take me that long to officially decide I believe Shigaraki would win this fight. Because actually, when I first heard of the matchup, I actually thought Mahito had this one in the bag. It didn't matter if Shigaraki was stronger or faster, because he couldn't kill Mahito. But then more information came out to me about how strong Shigaraki really was, and then, well, yeah, my opinion changed pretty quickly. And also, My Hero Academia really needed something good for its series. Now, admittedly, I actually don't think its track record is really that bad, but let's look at their episodes. Before Mahito vs. Shigaraki came out, there was All Might vs. Might Guy, a really good episode, although I do think it's a little overrated. Okay, I should probably say this before I get completely destroyed in the comments. I still really like this episode, and I still think it's a 9 out of 10. I just had a bit of issue with how All Might was characterized, but it wasn't such a big issue that it made me dislike the episode. I still really like this episode. Then we had Zuko versus Todoroki, which is an episode with pretty bad research, or at least basic research, that didn't really go over the two that well, and analysis that are questionable at best. However, I actually did really like the fight of it, or I thought the fight was decent. I wouldn't say really liked, but I don't think it looks that bad. I think the movement, while a little janky, still looks good. The fire effects are great. The death is really good. And, yeah, I enjoyed this episode, at least the fight of it. And then we have Deku versus Asta, which is kind of just there. I don't hate it. I don't love it. But I do occasionally listen to it in the background. But it's not, my main choice or anything. I wouldn't even be in the top 50 main choices I have. It's a pretty subpar episode. Analysis are pretty basic and don't really give me much. Then the fight itself is, well, not bad. It doesn't really make me like Asta very much as a character, and based on what I've heard of the episode, it sounds like this isn't what he is as a character. The death is just straight up feels disrespectful to Deku and Asta as characters. And overall, I just wasn't very excited. It wasn't an episode I cared for, it wasn't a matchup I cared for. It's kind of just there. Some good voice acting and some good combat. Like, I do like the fight for the most part between Deku and I forgot what this form is called of Asta's. Is it just Demon Asta or is there a different name to it? I don't know, and frankly, I do not care because I do not plan on watching Black Clover anytime soon. So yeah, while it wasn't the worst track record ever, it still wasn't necessarily the best and needed work. But now we have another episode with a My Hero Academia character, and maybe this could finally be their redemption. Let's see what the animation looks. Wait, this is animated by Moro? Why exactly? Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad it is, but like, I was not expecting that in the slightest. I thought this would be sprites for sure. But, I mean, yeah, this fight so far from the sneak peek looks fantastic. Let's see how the actual episode turned out. I mean, Bowser vs. Eggman is one of the best episodes in the show, if not the best episode in the show. So, let's see how it turned out. Starting off with their analysis segments, and while usually I wouldn't have much to say on these, yeah, I absolutely love these. Let's start off with the fact that just they go over the characters so well. Not even just their abilities, but their entire stories and just everything I could have wanted. The way they described All For One as the devil was probably one of the most interesting things I had ever heard in an episode. I don't know why, it just works so well. I just love how they go over both of their stories here, and it's just really cool. Even talking about their rivalries with the main characters is just so interesting to hear about. In my opinion, these are some of the best analysis in the show. Talking about Shigaraki in a lot of different ways, talking about how tragic his backstory is to some of the cringe things he says, then making him seem like a threat. It feels natural throughout the progression, talking about how he started as an incompetent leader all the way up to the end to his death. And how he got a hero, but sadly at this point it was too late. Mahito's analysis is somehow even better, or at least in my opinion it is. It doesn't just go over Mahito, but how curses work as a whole. It made me really understand how these curses worked. I mean, obviously, this is just Death Battle's view of it, but it made me understand them even better than I did now, and why this matchup was so interesting to cover. It's just an interesting dynamic. One character who seemingly has more stuff going on, but this other character just survives a whole lot more. Honestly, coming out of the analysis, it made me relook at this fight and made me wonder, hey, is Shigaraki actually going to win this? Now, admittedly, I still think Shigaraki should win this, but based on their own information, I wasn't totally sure who would win. Although I did notice they didn't mention much with how strong or fast Shigaraki was. They mentioned it kind of, how strong he was, but they don't actually say directly how fast he is. Just saying he can interact with lasers, while giving Mahito Mach 930. Now, admittedly, I should know that that is absolutely faster, reacting to lasers, but my brain was just, well, not really thinking at the time, and really more focusing on the stats that they gave directly. Yeah, but both of these analysis segments were great, and I honestly could have not have asked for any more than this. This is just fantastic on both ends. Now for the fight, and oh my god, what do I even say about this fight? Like, I mean, look at this. This is one of the best animated fights in the entire show, and I don't even think it's me alone on that. Like, seriously, how on earth did they do something like this? I mean, like, I know they've done similar fights like this in the past. Bowser vs. Eggman, animated by the same exact guy, and other hand-drawn fights like Scooby versus Courage or Saitama versus Popeye. And they've had a lot of good-looking shots in the past in sprite hand-drawn mixtures like Bill versus Discord and especially Fall Guys versus Among Us. This is just insane to me how they got it to look this good. But aside from that, how is the actual fight? I mean, the introduction, in my opinion, is one of the best in the show. It's not like Omni-Man versus Homelander's level of fantastic, but like, this is pretty good. Mahito kills a bunch of people. Shigaraki was actually looking for him because he knew that there were a powerful villain around this area, and he wanted to make new recruitments for, well, his destroying of the world, basically. And then Mahito basically calls it a waste of his time, but in probably the most fitting way ever. It's hilarious. And a really good interaction with Shigaraki. Basically at this point is like, okay, then I might as well see if you're worth my time, if you're not coming in willingly. And then that's where the fight begins, and oh my god, just everything looks so good. I mean, let's start off with the Nomus, which at first I was confused why they were even able to see Mahito. They don't have the search quirk. Until I realized Nomus are practically the exact thing that would be able to see curses. A close life and death scenario. Nomus are literally people brought back to life and are technically always dead, so yeah, I'm pretty sure they would actually be able to see Mahito. At least that's just what I think. I mean, that might be how it's portrayed. Who knows? But I also just love how these characters actually bounce off each other. With Shigaraki saying his weird gamer phrase, game over, and then Mahito basically was just like, seriously, that is something you actually just said, and calling him lame for it. And I like how it shows that Mahito is both enjoying this, but also trying to mess with Shigaraki, like with the kiss. It comes out of nowhere, but I think that makes sense here. And then how their powers clash off of each other with decay and how idle transfiguration works. Even the first move was literally Shigaraki, I believe, using danger sense to see what was happening and trying to understand that, yeah, if he gets hit, he will die. So he uses a separate part of his body to try to get away from this. And, well, obviously it does. To Mahito using the Nomus to attack Shigaraki, with Shigaraki simply just growing flesh to defend against it, and then using that opening to just use a move that he thought would take him out instantly, to even showing how Shigaraki later adapts to Black Flash, with at first it being so much faster than he can react, even though, yeah, they did say Shigaraki is way faster than Mahito, even with Black Flash, but, like, I think it's fitting. Basically, Black Flash catching him off guard a couple times, and throughout his fight later, he actually grows faster and faster, with the Black Flash seeming slower and slower. With the final Black Flash, he was able to catch and use it as an opening to use Decay. And, I mean, yeah, I said it many times already, but this fight just looks fantastic. There's not really anything I can complain about it at all, really. The fight in the train is where the fight looks its best. That might be because that's where the most abilities are used, but it just looks incredible. And, like, the fight between the perfect defense form and the instant spirit body of distorted killing, it's just awesome. Although it does actually make it feel like this form of Mahito is faster and stronger than Shigaraki. I kind of get the idea of it looking faster because it's technically smaller, but for the most part, it's the one doing damage, with Shigaraki only really ever landing one shot on this thing, despite Shigaraki having the speed advantage, which actually is my only main issue. It doesn't really ever feel like Shigaraki is faster. Not really bothered by it because the animation makes it work and makes sense, but based on the fact that they talked about how speed was a pretty big thing in Shigaraki's favor and why he could get off his kill options first, it just feels weird that he's not the faster, or at least there's more moments where he should be outspeeding Mahito. But then we have the probably best scene in the entire. Actually, I'm just going to say, I think this is the best scene in the entire show. Mahito's self embodiment of perfection. This is a very, very awesome scene. Like, this is the point where the climax obviously hits. If this does not work, Shigaraki basically just wins. But it's not an easy one. Everything about the scene looks fantastic, and the fact that Mahito is not only messing with Shigaraki at the same time, telling him that he was just a scared child that makes everyone deal with his problems, and he tells him to grow up. Showing that Mahito really does like messing with his victims and, well, basically showing them that this is not going to go well for them. However, the scene I was so excited to see was Mahito interacting with All For One. And, well, oh my gosh, this is great. It's in the exact format as the Sukuna scene, and it just looks awesome. With basically All For One, I think, depowering Mahito. That's the best way I can explain it, because he basically took away his transformation. I guess he could have just overpowered it, but I just like the idea that he just took away that power. Again, that might have not been what happened. He just overpowered Mahito outright, causing him to get out of the form. But I just think it's a cool idea. But anyways, then Shigaraki does exactly what I wanted him to do in the animation. Decay away the domain. And then we have probably one of the best deaths of the show. Shigaraki basically decaying the whole train tunnel as Mahito tries desperately to escape because, again, this is kind of just what he does. He is a coward when he can't actually face something he can beat. He tries to escape, but it's all in vain. He tries using his transformations to get out of it, but the decay has already caught up to him. And while he is able to detach his body parts so he can try escaping it, Shigaraki just catches up with him. And basically, throughout this entire interaction, Shigaraki is being judgmental and commenting based on what Mahito told him about him being childish. But he basically says he actually hates humanity for a good reason, while Mahito just hates them because he just does. I mean, that's because he was made for. He doesn't hate him with any good reason. And Shigaraki spends his line of growing up back on him as he kills Mahito. And we're left there in silence. And yeah, this was just fantastic. I have very little complaints with this animation. In fact, actually, other than that speed thing, this might be one of the most flawless animations Death Battle has ever done. And I'm saying that knowing that Bowser vs. Eggman exists. I think this animation has fewer problems than that one. And I'm saying that as a person who thinks Bowser vs. Eggman is also one of the best animations in the entire show. I genuinely think this one actually looks better. And, I mean, that's just a personal thing. Obviously, Bowser vs. Eggman is a very gorgeous episode, but actually, we'll compare the two in a little bit. But now, let's get to the conclusion of the episode. Now for the conclusion, if you watched my prediction video, yeah, this is about everything I thought. Even though there are some interesting things that I saw. They actually saw vestiges as souls, which was one of the most important things I think to go over for this type of matchup. And they talked about how Shigaraki stat stomps Mahito, but Mahito's survivability makes him extremely difficult to kill. But Shigaraki had the abilities necessary to pull this off. And I mean, they make it seem pretty close, actually. And they also talk about how Idol Transfiguration wasn't the perfect counter that Mahito needed to win this type of fight. I mean, this is exactly how I thought the matchup would go because I made a prediction on it, but yeah, this pretty much pointed out everything that I mentioned in my video and more. I don't really have much else to say other than that. I think this is a really good conclusion and went over the points well. So, yeah, let's get to the comparison. Now, I'm going to be very clear about this. This is a 10 out of 10 episode. This is one of the most flawless videos, not just in Death Battle, but in YouTube history, in my opinion. Now, obviously, you can have problems with the research, but this is their own research, not your research. And from what I saw, I did not see any flaws in their research from what they gathered. Obviously, you can have your different opinions as well. I just think from what they represented, this was really well done. And the fight, as I said, this is just spectacular. There is so few flaws with it, and even the flaw isn't even with the animation itself, is just more of the fact that it didn't quite match what they said in the conclusion about speed, but even then, Black Flash is literally meant to be fast, and the fact that Mahito was outspeeding him there is supposed to make the attack seem more impactful. So while I can complain as much as I want about that, I don't think it matters that much. And is really just a slight nitpick. So, where does this episode place overall in comparison to the other Death Battle episodes? And let's compare it to Bowser vs. Eggman, which is probably the most easy to compare it to. I mean, they're both almost flawless episodes with Moro as the main animator, and I mean, like, seriously, like, Moro, you're doing fantastic. I already liked you before Death Battle hired you as an animator, but, like, seriously. Now, I actually should say that Bowser vs. Eggman is not my favorite Death Battle episode. It's my second favorite Death Battle episode. In my opinion, Saitama vs. Popeye is better than Bowser vs. Eggman, and I just have always kind of thought that. As much as I love Bowser vs. Eggman and its fantastic fight, Saitama vs. Popeye I just think did stuff a little better. The fight itself, they are really close, but I like Saitama vs. Popeye's conclusion and analysis more. But let's compare these three against each other, seeing which one is the overall best, in my opinion. If you want to know what my number 4 is, it is Bill Cipher vs. Discord. Yeah, this is also a great episode, but I think it's really close with a bunch of others like Dante versus Bayonetta and Iron Man versus Lex Luthor and Solid Snake versus Sam Fisher. Quite a few episodes are really close to it, but I think Bill versus Discord would take fourth barely. But enough with Bill versus Discord. Let's talk about the three that are actually important. These three are absolutely my top 3 favorite episodes, but in what order would I put them? Actually, I would say Bowser vs. Eggman is the worst of the 3. Now, obviously, people are not going to agree with me on that. In fact, I expect to absolutely be alone in thinking that. My biggest issues with Bowser vs. Eggman, one, they kind of treated my boy Infinite kind of dirty, and that makes me a little salty. I wasn't entirely convinced, especially knowing a lot about Bowser and Eggman, that Bowser should have won the episode, especially since it felt like they took a lot of stuff from Eggman's arsenal and just didn't mention it in the conclusion. And I mean, yeah, I still absolutely love the episode, but I think it just has those 2 slight problems that put it below the other 2. With Saitama vs. Popeye being actually my second place position. I actually thought at first I would put this at first again, but thinking of it a little more, I have to differentiate what my favorite episode is compared to the best episode. And I always want to focus on what I personally like more than what other people do. As much as I love Saitama vs. Popeye and how perfect this episode is, The matchup doesn't really mean that much to me as a whole, and it just didn't get me as pumped as Shigaraki versus Mahito did. Don't get me wrong, I was still really pumped for Saitama versus Popeye, and I mean, second place is still fantastic for it. If I still believe it's better than Bowser versus Eggman, that is just a honor that is really hard to beat. But despite me thinking it is the objective best episode of Death Battle, it's not my favorite episode. And so by process of elimination, Mahito versus Shigaraki is my new favorite Death Battle episode of all time. Now, who knows if that opinion will stick? Maybe my opinion will change over time. But from my first viewings, and I've already watched this episode like 10 times already. Yeah, I don't really have a life. But anyways, this, in my opinion, has one of the best analysis segments of the show, a conclusion that is really well put and I think works really well. And the animation is so flawless that I just have to find slight nitpicks with it. Even with Bowser versus Eggman and Saitama versus Popeye, there was stuff I genuinely say like, I'm not like the biggest fan of that, like the 3D Popeye model or Infinite Dying or something like that. Like there are stuff I can say genuine criticisms of in the animation themselves, or I guess they're more like nitpicks, obviously. This one doesn't have that. There is not a single shot where I don't go, oh my god, this is incredible. Not to mention, Shigaraki is one of my favorite characters they've ever used, so maybe that bias is what is making me like this episode even more. But yeah, Shigaraki versus Mahito is my favorite Death Battle episode in Death Battle history. Now, I should probably mention two things before I close out the video. One, where is my Red vs. Sonic.exe versus review? If you don't know what I'm talking about, I set up a community post almost a week ago at this point of me recording this, talking about how I wanted to review One Fish Mob's and Debate Club's video of Sonic.exe versus Red, and I was going to compare and contrast the two. It's actually more interesting of a comparison than you might think, since One Fish Mob's version came out 5 years before Debate Club. So I'm actually going over them with the idea of that. But for the reason why that video didn't come out, well, the truth is I got really sick and I couldn't really record it. And by the time I started feeling up to making a video, that was, well, today really, when Mahito versus Shigaraki ended up coming out. So I decided to work on this review instead, since the whole point of the Sonic.exe versus Red thing was to get a review out before this episode came out. But now that it has come out, there's not really much of a point of me doing that right now. Obviously, I'm still going to do it. In fact, I've gotten the script for it done already, and I just need to record the voiceover for it. But other than that, yeah, I decided to do this one instead. And for the next time, Master Chief versus Doomslayer. I mean, sorry, Master Chief. Yeah, this one is even more clear-cut than Mahito versus Shigaraki as a matchup is. Yeah, sorry. There is no way Master Chief is winning this. Regardless on how you spin it, Doomslayer is more powerful, faster, more experienced and skilled, and has better weaponry, with the only advantages I can think of Chief having off the top of my head is being more agile and more intelligent. But even then, those categories aren't exactly like a very wide gap. Am I excited for the episode to see how it will turn out? Yeah, but there's no debatability to it. I mean, if Death Battles for some reason says Chief wins, I'll be happy, but I'll know it won't make much sense. So, yeah, but that's not going to happen. I certainly was not expecting this to be the next time, since, I mean, we didn't even know that it was going to happen until after the fan vote, which, compared to the other revealed battles that already existed, we assumed they were working on those first, but I guess they already have this one up and done, which does make me concerned of what its quality is going to be like, but hey, I'm willing to stay hopeful that this will be a good episode. Let's hope it doesn't reach a Kratos versus Azra levels of kind of disappointing. Spoiler alert on my opinion on that episode. But basically, yeah. So overall, that was the video. And I hope you guys enjoyed it at least somewhat. And what are your guys' opinion on Mahito versus Shigaraki? This has been a fun one to do. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace.